This is a portrait of Lady Charlotte Fitzroy with her Moorish page. Charlotte Fitzroy, born in the year 1664, was the illegitimate daughter of Charles II of England and his mistress, Barbara Villars. The painting is attributed to Peter Lely, the principal court painter of Charles II's reign in England. The approximate date is given as 672 to 679. According to some sources, it was made in the year 1674. It is in the collection of the York Museum Trust, York Art Gallery. Charlotte Fitzroy, the second daughter of the king, and Barbara Villars, also looks very sweet, being served grapes by a black boy. This work was most likely painted when Charlotte was 9 and engaged to Henry Lee, the first Earl of Lakefield, whom she married in the year 1677 when she was only 12 years old. Her groom was a year older. The girl's gaze is not childish, but wise, as if she looks past the viewer. She is dressed half in classical and half in contemporary clothing. The relief with cherubs and a goat behind her hints at the frivolous youth of her father, Charles II. The grapes are a symbol of virginity, and her bare leg shows that she has no flaws in her figure. But how delightedly the little mulatto gazes at Charlotte. In Peter Lely's portrait of Lady Charlotte Fitzroy with her page in the year 1674, the young attendant has been variously described in the historical record as an Indian page, a black page, or a Moorish servant. The ambiguity reflects how Restoration and later catalogers used racial terms loosely and inconsistently. Moorish in 17th century English usage didn't mean Moroccan Moor. Specifically, it was a catch-all term for dark-skinned peoples. Indian also. The term was also loosely applied to anyone considered exotic. A Moorish or black page was a status symbol. It signified wealth and worldliness. Egmont Godfrey, a Surinamese Dutch cultural critic and independent researcher, has argued that many 17th century European portraits used coded racial symbolism to communicate lineage, power, and legitimacy. And his readings, particularly in his writings and lectures on blue blood is black blood, the black page or Moor is not merely a servant or exotic accessory, but a symbolic double of the sitter's own royal ancestry. In this case, King Charles II, known to his contemporaries as the Black Boy. The Black Boy in the painting is a symbol of Charles II, King of England. Charles II, his dark complexion and curly hair was remarked upon by his contemporaries. He was sometimes called the Black Boy or Old Rowley. The name of the king stallion, his race stallion, was Rowley. The horse was libidinous, and also the king was too, who had many mistresses, and the king sired many illegitimate children. The young, dark-skinned attendant beside Charlotte Fitzroy would not just be a decorative servant, but a visual emblem of her father, the Black King. The child's submissive gesture towards Charlotte, offering grapes, symbols of abundance and fertility, would imply she inherits the king's wealth and fortune. Thus, the composition becomes an allegory of royal lineage and patrilineal blessing, not merely aristocratic luxury. If we follow Godfrey's logic, the Black Moorish boy, symbolically Charles II, the Black Boy, the grapes and richness equals inheritance and blessing. The youth of Charlotte equals the continuation of the royal line. The painting, then, is a veiled declaration of legitimate royal descent and future prosperity, despite Charlotte's illegitimacy. Universal Center for Renovation presents historical and biblical Israelites. This video is strictly for educational purposes and commentary. This video is of biblical and secular historical literature. So, enjoy. Charles II was the King of Scotland before becoming King of England and Ireland. After the execution of his father, Charles I, in the year 1649, the Scots proclaimed his son, Charles II, as King of the Scots on February the 5th in the year 1649. The Stuarts were originally a Scottish royal dynasty long before they ruled over England or the unified British kingdoms. Charles II, who lived from the years 1630 to 1685, belonged to the House of Stuart. For most of the Middle Ages, Scotland and England were independent kingdoms, often rivals and sometimes enemies. Scotland was ruled by the Stuart dynasty from the year 1371 onward. England was ruled by the Plantagenets or Plantagenets. Then the Tudors. By the late 1500s, England's ruling Tudor dynasty faced a succession crisis. Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled from the years 1558 to 1603, never married and had no children. So when she died, there was no direct English heirs. When Elizabeth I died in March 1603, the English Privy Council invited James VI of Scotland to take the English throne. He became James I of England, uniting the crowns of both countries. This event is called the Union of the Crowns in the year 1603. So the Scots became kings of England through marriage, bloodline, and inheritance, not conquest. King James I of England, a Stuart, was the monarch who authorized the King James Version of the Bible. Scotland. Wikipedia article. Scotland is a country that is part of the United Kingdom. It contains nearly 1/3 of the United Kingdom's land area, consisting of the northern part of the island of Great Britain and more than 790 adjacent islands, principally in the archipelagos of the Hebrides and the Northern Islands. Scotland was a kingdom ruled by a monarch, a king or queen. But beneath that crown were many powerful clans and noble families, each controlling their own lands, loyalties, and armies. The Stuarts were originally one of those families, just one powerful lineage among many, before they rose to become the royal house. This is a real and well-respected reference book on Scottish clans and heraldry. Scottish Clan and Family Encyclopedia. Authors George Way of Pleen and Romilly Squire, a noted Scottish heraldic artist and scholar. This encyclopedia is essentially the definitive modern guide to Scotland's clans, families, and coats of arms. It includes histories and origins of over 300 Scottish clans and families. The Scottish Clan and Family Encyclopedia is widely used by people tracing Scottish ancestry or authentic clan connections. On page 74 and 75 is the Borthwick family that have a moorhead in their family standard. The Borthwick family crest features a moor's head, which has been a prominent symbol in their heraldry. David McRitchie, a Scottish folklorist and antiquarian, is known for his theories suggesting that certain Scottish families, including those bearing surnames like Moorhead, may have origins linked to the Moors or Levantine regions. In his works, McRitchie proposed that the Moors, often depicted in heraldry, were not merely symbolic, but represented actual historical connections to North African or Middle Eastern ancestries. He believed that these families might have retained cultural and physical traits from these regions, possibly due to ancient migrations or interactions. The Borthwick family is indeed considered one of the oldest noble lineages in Scotland, with a history that stretches back many centuries. Some traditions even suggest a very early presence in Britain. Some historical and genealogical accounts, especially older ones like those in the Scottish clan histories, suggest the family may trace its ancestry back to Roman times. There's a tradition that the Borthwicks may have come to Britain with Julius Caesar's legions, or later Roman troops. Borthwick. The family is one of the most ancient in Scotland, and some recent research suggests that they may have come to Britain with Caesar's legions. The Borthwicks formed alliances with other noble and powerful families by marriage. The Borthwick crest includes a Moor's head, which some authors, including David McRitchie, interpreted as suggesting foreign or Levantine origins. The Borthwicks were powerful medieval land owners and held significant offices in Scotland. Some traditions suggest that the Borthwick family may trace their origins back to Roman Britain, possibly as part of Caesar's legions or other Roman troops stationed in Britain. Heraldic symbols like the Moor's head that some antiquarians like David McRitchie interpreted as hinting at foreign or Mediterranean ancestry. Many ancient Scottish families claimed Roman or exotic origins as a mark of prestige. If families like the Borthwicks genuinely had Levantine or Moorish ancestry, then by Thomas Huxley's system, they might have been categorized as melanochroi. Dark whites. melanocroy, dark colored whites. According to Thomas Huxley, the melanocroy, or dark whites, and the xanthocroy, or fear whites, made up the population of Britain. This is one of Thomas Huxley's key anthropological claims about the racial composition of Britain in the 19th century. Huxley suggested that the modern British population was a blend of these two white groups with variations in skin, hair, and eye color, reflecting the relative mix. Thomas Huxley lived from the years 1825 to 1895, was a prominent British biologist, anatomist, and outspoken advocate of evolutionary theory, often nicknamed Darwin's bulldog for his vigorous defense of Charles Darwin's ideas. He played a key role in shaping 19th century science and public understanding of biology. He was instrumental in establishing biology as a rigorous science in Britain. He helped establish science museums and research institutions. He mentored to many important scientists, including Julian Huxley, his grandson, and others. Thomas Huxley was widely regarded as one of the most respected and influential men of Victorian Britain, both within science and in broader society. Huxley was considered one of Victorian Britain's foremost intellectuals, respected by peers, students, and the public alike. A man whose opinions shaped science, education, and society. Comparative table of the fair whites and dark whites after Thomas Huxley and David McRitchie, 1884. The fair whites, xanthocroy, light-colored people, The dark whites, melanochroi, dark colored whites. The Caucasian race, fear, and dark whites. Two types, one race. Thomas Huxley's system of classifying humans within the Caucasian race was broad. Huxley recognized that the Caucasians themselves were diverse, noting features like skin color, very fair, Nordic, to olive or brownish, Mediterranean. The hair type, straight to wavy or even woolly, textured hair. Huxley's Caucasian race included a spectrum from very fair, light hair Europeans to darker skinned, wavy or woolly haired Mediterranean and Levantine populations, reflecting his attempt to classify human diversity in 19th century terms. David McRitchie, the Scottish folklorist and antiquarian, drew on Thomas Huxley's racial classifications. David McRitchie applied this framework to Scotland and Britain to theorize about the origins of various families and clans. Fair whites, xanthochroi, light-colored people. Geographical distribution: Northern Europe, Scandinavia, Northern Germany, the Low Countries, parts of Northern Britain. Dark whites, melanochroi, dark-colored whites. Geographic distribution: Western and Southern Europe, Iberia, Wales, Ireland, Brittany, Southern Britain, also North Africa, and the Levant. Dark whites, geographic distribution: Western and Southern Europe, Iberia, Wales, Ireland, Brittany, Southern Britain, also North Africa, and the Levant. Some Scottish families, particularly those with heraldic symbols like the Moor's head, could have Mediterranean or Levantine melanochroi ancestry. The Levant, home to the ancient civilizations like the Canaanites, Phoenicians, Israelites, Arameans. The trade hub between Europe, Africa, and Asia for millennia. David McRitchie and similar scholars suggested several routes through which Levantine Mediterranean ancestry could enter Britain. Roman occupation from the years 43 AD to 410 AD. Roman legions included people from all parts of the empire, including the Eastern Mediterranean. Trade and mercenaries. Mediterranean traders, sailors, or mercenaries occasionally settled in Britain. Families with more heads or names like Morris or Moorhead, or have Moors in their arms, coats of arms, were sometimes interpreted as having foreign or Levantine roots. The Levant. Wikipedia article. The Levant is a sub-region of West Asia along the Eastern Mediterranean that forms part of the Middle East. The term is often used in conjunction with historical or cultural references. In its narrowest sense, used in archaeology and other contexts, the Levant refers to Cyprus and land bordering the Mediterranean Sea in West Asia. That includes the Syria region, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, and South Cilicia, Turkey. In its widest historical sense, the Levant included all the Eastern Mediterranean, extending from Greece to Egypt and Cyrenaica, Eastern Libya. The Levant represents the land bridge between Africa and Eurasia. Has been described as the crossroads of West Asia, Eastern Mediterranean, and Northeast Africa, and geologically as the northwest of the Arabian Plate. In Thomas Huxley's and many 19th century anthropologists' frameworks, the term Caucasian was extremely broad. Definition of Caucasian: all peoples of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Essentially, all Europeans, North Africans, and Middle Easterners were considered white Caucasian, but subdivided into fair and dark varieties. Caucasian was not synonymous with fair skin. It was a continental racial category. The Caucasian race, fair and dark whites, two types, one race. Huxley's Caucasian category was not strictly about skin color. Huxley, following the racial theories of his time, defined Caucasians as all peoples of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The key point, anyone from the classical biblical lands or Europe, regardless of whether they were fair-skinned, olive-skinned, or darker, they were classified as Caucasian. This includes Jews, Arabs, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and Europeans of all shades. In this framework, Mediterranean peoples, Levantines, and North Africans were all white Caucasian. Physical variation, dark hair, wavy hair, olive skin, did not remove someone from the Caucasian category. Huxley's Caucasian race was geographically defined, encompassing all people from Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, regardless of skin tone or hair type. The divisions into fair or dark whites were minor variations within this broad category. The way we use the term white today is very different from Huxley's or Victorian era racial classifications. Victorian Caucasian was geographic, not purely color based. Modern white is mostly a social construct tied to light skin and cultural identification, not geography. Mediterranean, Levantine, or North African peoples who were Caucasian in Huxley's system might not be considered white today, even though they fell under the same race in Victoria anthropology. When scholars like McRitchie or Huxley said someone was Caucasian or melanocroid, they were talking about ancestry and geographic origin, not the modern idea of whiteness. Modern racial categories are more socially constructed and do not map neatly onto these older scientific classifications. Huxley's Caucasian equals anyone from Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East, regardless of skin tone, while modern white is narrower, mainly light-skinned Europeans, and excludes most Middle Easterners or North African populations. White people, Wikipedia. White is a historical specification of skin color and a modern classification of race. Most often, it is applied to generally identify people of European origin. But the exact definition of white can vary, depending on context and points of view. Beyond racialization, the word simply denotes any person with light skin, usually that which is colored carnation. Description of populations as white in reference to their skin color is occasionally found in Greco-Roman ethnography and in other ancient or medieval sources. But these societies did not have any notion of a white race or a pan-European identity. The racialized understanding of white race or white people entered the major European languages in the late 17th century, when the concept of a unified white people achieved greater acceptance in Europe, particularly in the context of race-based slavery and social status in the world's European colonies. 19th and 20th century, the Caucasian race. Between the mid-19th and mid-20th centuries, race scientists, including most physical anthropologists, classified the world's populations into 3, 4, or 5 races, which, depending on the authority consulted, were further divided into various sub-races. During this period, the Caucasian race, named after people of the Caucasus Mountains, but extending to all Europeans, figured as one of these races and was incorporated as a formal category of both pseudoscientific research and, in countries including the United States, social classification. There was never any scholarly consensus on the delineation between the Caucasian race. Some authorities, following Huxley in the year 1870, distinguished the xanthochroi, or light whites, of Northern Europe with the melanochroi, or dark whites, of the Mediterranean. Thomas Huxley's racial definitions. By the late 19th century, Huxley's xanthochroi group had been redefined as the Nordic race, whereas his melanochroi became the Mediterranean race. His melanochroi thus eventually also comprised various other dark Caucasoid populations, including the Hamites, for example, the Berbers, Somalis, Northern Sudanese, ancient Egyptians, and Moors. In Huxley's framework, the melanochroi, or dark whites, the category was extended to include southern and Mediterranean populations, which could encompass a wide range of darker-skinned groups within the broad Caucasian race. Somalis and Northern Sudanese are among the darkest-skinned populations on Earth, with rich brown to very deep skin tones. In modern racial terms, we often categorize them as sub-Saharan African or East African, not white. Despite their dark skin, Huxley still placed some of these groups within the Caucasian race, specifically as melanochroi. Anyone from Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East, even very dark-skinned people, were considered part of the Caucasian family. In Huxley's system, skin color was secondary to ancestry and geographic origin. That's why some of the darkest people on Earth, like Somalis or Northern Sudanese, were still classified as melanochroi within the Caucasian race, even though today they would clearly be seen as a separate racial category. Huxley's map of racial categories from his book on the geographical distribution of the chief modifications of mankind, the year 1870. And classification number 4, melanochroi, including Hamites and Moors. Melanochroi, dark whites, Caucasians, including Hamites and Moors. Huxley states, it is to the xanthochroi and melanochroi taken together that the absurd denomination of Caucasian is usually applied. Huxley's melanochroi eventually comprised various other dark Caucasoid populations, including the Hamites and Moors. Ancient and Modern Bretons, Volume 1 and Volume 2, by David McRitchie. Here's a concise synopsis of David McRitchie's Ancient and Modern Bretons in 2 volumes. In the 1890s, McRitchie sought to trace the origins and physical types of the British people, combining anthropology, archaeology, and folklore. He argued that modern Bretons were a mixture of multiple racial streams from ancient times. One of the most detailed late Victorian attempts to connect British physical diversity to ancient migrations and Mediterranean ancestry. McRitchie used historical events like the English Civil War 1642 to 1651 as a way to illustrate racial and physical types in Britain. He argued that the Royalists, supporters of King Charles I and II, and the Parliamentarians, the Roundheads, sometimes reflected different ancestral or racial strains in Britain. In collaboration with artificial intelligence, let's take a deeper dive. My question: let's go back to pages 4 and 5. Fair whites of tall stature, having the skin almost colorless and so delicate that the blood really shows through it. The eyes are blue or gray, hair ranging from straw color to red or chestnut. The beard and body hair abundant. And this is the reply from artificial intelligence, AI. Excellent. You are referring to pages 4 and 5 of Ancient and Modern Bretons, Volume 1, where McRitchie quotes from T.H. Huxley's On the Chief Modifications of Mankind and expands upon it. Let's examine that description carefully and interpret how it fits into McRitchie's larger racial framework, especially in contrast to the dark whites and Iberian or Moorish Bretons discussed later. A primary passage, Volume 1, page 4 and 5. The first division is composed of the fair whites, who are described as of tall stature, having the skin almost colorless and so delicate that the blood really shows through it. The eyes are blue or gray, the hair light, ranging from straw color to red or chestnut. The beard and body hair abundant. The skull presents all varieties of form, from extreme dolichocephaly to extreme brachycephaly. That is, that this class includes men with very long and very short heads. And the parliamentarians, or roundheads, were largely Puritans, and their influence extended far beyond 17th century England. Supporters of Parliament against King Charles I during the English Civil War 1642 to 1651. Many Puritans immigrated to New England in the early 1600s and later decades, escaping religious persecution. Their ideals shaped early American society. Their ideas influenced the political and social foundations of the USA, including notions of self-government and constitutional checks on authority. What this means: this is the Nordic or xanthocroic type. The word xanthocroic comes from Greek xanthos, yellow, plus chora, skin or color. It was used by 19th century anthropologists to describe what they saw as the purest white or northern type of European. Physical traits: very light, almost translucent skin, blue or gray eyes, blonde to red hair, tall stature, and abundant body hair. McRitchie, citing Huxley, positions these people as the fair whites or northern stock. What later racial theorists, especially in the late 19th, early 20th century, would call Nordic. Contrast: the dark whites immediately following Huxley and McRitchie describe the second type, the dark whites, melanochroi. The second type is that of the dark whites, of which he says, under its best form. This type is exhibited by many Irishmen, Welshmen, and Bretons, by Spaniards, South Italians, Greeks, Armenians, Arabs, and high caste Brahmins or East Indians. A man of this group may, in point of physical beauty and intellectual energy, be the equal of the best of the xanthochroi, but he presents a great contrast in other respects. The skin, though clear and transparent, is of a more or less brown hue, deepening to olive. The hair, fine and wavy, is black, and the eyes are of a like hue. The Cavaliers and Puritans represented contrasting social, cultural, and political models in early colonial America. Supporters of King Charles I and II, the Royalists, who fled England after the Civil War or during the Commonwealth period. Many were aristocratic or gentry families with wealth and social status. They established plantation-based societies, relying heavily on tobacco cultivation and later enslaved labor. McRitchie's use of these two types. McRitchie accepts Huxley's typology, but subverts its hierarchy, whereas earlier ethnologists tended to rank the fair whites above the dark whites. McRitchie argues that both groups, and especially the darker ones, are ancestral to Britain and connected to the Iberians, Basque of Spain, and Moors. He later explains that these dark whites are not foreign or inferior, but the true old Britons with brown or olive complexions, wavy or curly black hair, shorter stature, and connection to Southern Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Virginia became a bastion or a home of aristocratic Cavalier descended families, influencing Southern politics and culture for centuries. New England retained a Puritan work ethic, community governance, and democratic ideals. The tension between these two cultural models foreshadowed regional differences that contributed to later American conflicts, including the Civil War. It does seem rather odd that the dark types favored indentured slavery and forced labor. It does seem counterintuitive at first, especially when looking through a modern lens, when we often associate darker skin with oppression rather than social dominance. But when you examine the context, it becomes clearer. Many Cavaliers were aristocratic, land-owning royalists, accustomed to hierarchical social structures. Their wealth and power depended on land cultivation, particularly tobacco in Virginia, which was labor intensive. They favored indentured servitude and later enslaved Israelites, who was called Africans, and Natives Americans, who were also Israelites, even though the Cavaliers themselves, many of them was Israelites. They favored indentured reinforced servitude or enforced servitude and later enslaved labor because it maximized economic output and reinforced social hierarchy. Not necessarily because of their physical type, they were dark. Cavaliers came from a worldview shaped by monarchy and gentry culture. Social order was paramount. Labor was often coerced, whether through indentured servitude of Europeans or enslaved so-called Africans who were Israelites. They were protecting wealth and status, not primarily making decisions based on racial ideologies. At first, although racialized slavery became entrenched in America over time, contrast this lifestyle with Puritans. Puritans in New England had smaller farms, and they were more communal. They were moralistic in their approaches to life. Their ideology favored hard work by free families rather than large-scale forced labor. While Puritans still participated in slavery, their economic model didn't rely on large plantation systems, so coerced labor was less central to them. The fact that darker Melanochroid descended Cavaliers supported indentured and enslaved labor is less about skin color or ancestry and more about social class, economic system, and context. Historical context. It highlights how power and economic structure can override racial or ethnic background and shaping labor practices. This is why Cavaliers' preference for forced labor fits their aristocratic and hierarchical worldview, despite their Mediterranean or Melanchroy features, their dark features. Ethnological context. This two-type model, fair versus dark whites, reflects the anthropological debates of the mid-1800s. Fair whites, Xanthocroy, Scandinavian, German, Northern Britain. Dark whites, Melanchroy, Mediterranean, Iberia, Western Britain, Wales, and Ireland. McRitchie uses this distinction to argue that, number one, the earliest Britons were dark whites, closer in appearance to Moors or Iberians. Number two, the later fair whites, Teutonic, Anglo-Saxon, Norse, arrived later and superimposed themselves over the darker indigenous population. Number three, therefore the true ancient Britons were swarthy, small, and curly-haired, not blonde and tall. Connection to later chapters. In Volume 1, Chapter 3, The Painted Moors, McRitchie links these dark whites directly to the Picts, Moors, and Iberians, the same people remembered as the Black Celts or Moorish Britons. So the passage on page 4 and 5 lays the groundwork for the entire thesis of ancient and modern Britons. The fair whites, Nordics, were newcomers. The dark whites, Mediterranean, Afro-Iberian types, were the indigenous Britons, whose memory survived in medieval references to Moors, Picts, and Black Scots. In the American colonies, the Cavaliers, the former ruling class of Britain, the lords, the nobles, became planter elites, establishing plantations and using forced labor. Puritans, the former working class, the serfs of Britain, established self-governing, industrious communities in New England. So the upstairs-downstairs dynamic from England was inverted in some ways. Puritans gained political autonomy in the colonies, while Cavaliers retained economic power through land and labor. This background helps explain why Puritans were egalitarian, moralistic, and community-orientated. The Cavaliers believed in hierarchy. They were status-conscious and tolerant of forced labor systems. It also highlights how ancestry, class, and historical experience shape social institutions and cultural norms over generations. Comparative table: the fair whites and dark whites after Huxley and McRitchie, 1884. Type: scientific name, physical traits, from page 4 and 5. And representative peoples given by Huxley and McRitchie, and their geographical or geographic distribution. Fair whites, xanthocroy, light-colored people. Physical traits: tall stature, skin almost colorless, blood visible beneath, eyes blue or gray, hair from straw color to red or chestnut, beard and body hair abundant, skull shape variable, long or short head. Representative peoples: Scandinavians, Anglo-Saxons, Norman, North Germans, Danes, some Northern Britons. Geographic distribution: Northern Europe, Scandinavia, Northern Germany, the Low Countries, Belgium, parts of Northern Britain. Type: dark whites. Scientific name: melanocroy, dark colored whites. Physical traits: medium to short stature, skin light brown to olive or tawny, hair black, fine, and wavy or curly, eyes dark brown or black, often shorter head, brachycephalic. Representative peoples: Irish, Welsh, Bretons, Spaniards, South Italians, Greeks, Armenians, Arabs, high caste Brahmins, East Indians, and Pakistanians. Geographic distribution: Western and Southern Europe, Iberia, Wales, Ireland, Brittany, Southern Britain, also North Africa, and the Levant. In the past, the black boy, King Charles II, who was a dark white, could have a fair white daughter, and that was common. In the context of Huxley's and McRitchie's framework, that would be considered perfectly plausible and even expected. Xanthocroy equals fair whites and melanocroy equals dark whites. They were considered part of the same race. So mixing between melanocroy and xanthocroy was not only possible but common. A dark white father, melanocroy, for example, King Charles II, could easily father a fairer child with xanthocroy traits. In aristocratic families, lineage often included diverse ancestral strands, so children could vary noticeably in complexion from their parents. In portraits and accounts of European royal families, variability in skin, hair, and eye color within the same family was common, reflecting centuries of intermarriage across regions. So a dark-haired or dark-skinned king having a fair-haired or fair-skinned daughter would not have been unusual. Within the Victorian racial framework and historical reality, the concept of a dark white father producing a fair white child was entirely plausible. Skin tone, hair color, and eye color could shift significantly within a single generation because all these groups were considered part of the same Caucasian spectrum. In David McRitchie's interpretation, the dark whites, melanocroy, were the earliest inhabitants of the British Isles, whose descendants persisted among the Welsh, Irish, and Highland Scots. He argues that their swarthy and Iberian characteristics reflect a southern or Afro-Mediterranean origin. Later, fair whites, invaders, Xanthocroi, Saxons, Danes, Normans, overlaid, but never fully replaced them. Thus, much of the British population retains traces of Moorish or Iberian ancestry beneath a northern veneer.